Chapter 83, They Fell Among Thieves. They fell among thieves. Frithia twisted under the blankets, trying to find a way out and instantly regretting it the moment she had, the cold air and bright dawn light that was pouring through the open curtains doing nothing for her headache. She blinked, wondering through the haze why she had even woken, when the knocking came again, her door rattling with the persistent summons.
"All right, I'm calm, I'm coming. Mech!"
she cried, as she wrenched the door open on the dark-haired boy. Her distress was instant.
"Oh, Mech, no, I only got to bed a few hours ago and I'm really hungover. In fact,"
she leaned in, her voice dropped to conspiratorial whisper,
"I think I'm still a bit drunk."
But the boy just shook his head, looking grave. "Sorry, m'lady,
Igold says it's really important." "Oh, when isn't it?"
Frithia groaned, turning back into the room and pointing the boy to her chair as she wandered behind her screen to dress.
"So, what is it this time? Zurin's crying in the dressing rooms because Althea said he was looking old? Higold's got himself lost in the props cupboard again? Oh, I know, the king of Termish himself has pitched up, neat little beard and all, and is demanding to play the role of the leading lady."
On the other side of the screen, Mech was giggling.
"No, patron, nothing like that." "Well, I suppose we should be thankful for small mercies,"
Frithia sighed, stepping round the screen to catch up her cloak and throw an arm towards the door.
"Lay on, Mech."
He led her through the empty streets at a brisk trot, the cold air quite refreshing, though the pace was doing little for her hangover. The 5 Flagons was not yet open for business, but the door was unlocked, Mech holding it open for her before darting ahead once more as they crossed that silent empty tavern, the chairs still stacked upon the tables from the night before. Downstairs, only the lamps nearest the stage had been lit, their soft glow falling upon a huddle of whispering people, and Frithia felt her stomach drop. Everyone, all the cast and crew, were there, gathered upon the stage, and Frithia did not want to imagine the disaster that could have brought them all there at such an hour. Her headache seemed suddenly all the worse.
"Oh, gods, what's happened?"
Higold whirled, flapping over to greet her as she climbed the steps to join them, Mech leaving her side to stand with Win and Jenna.
"Ah, my patron, thank you for attending at such short notice. I, for one..." "Get on with it, Higold,"
shouted a gruff voice from somewhere in the crowd behind him that sounded a lot like Ketrick.
"Ah, yes, well now, I appreciate that when you began this theatre, you knew little of the business, my lady, though you have learned much in the meantime, and I know you understand that certain investments can take a time to come to fruition. A new theatre such as this does not begin to make money until much later on in the season, after all the bills have been paid and the like."
Higold glanced back to those assembled behind him, uncharacteristically solemn.
"But Alhina went around the creditors yesterday with Althea, and it seems with the play doing so well, most are happy to wait a little longer. And Samuel has said that since the play began, he is doing such a roaring trade, we need not pay the tab for this month as thanks. And before yesterday's performance, Zurin and Jenna paid a few visits about the city to those nobles well known for their benefaction to such cultural pillars of Athkatla, and all were glad led their patronage to our own flourishing institution. One Lady Nalia, who was staying over at the Justefs's estate, was most munificent. And we had a meeting last night, and all decided that with our meals taken here and the like, well, our wages need not be quite so generous this month, and so, well..."
Higold trailed off with a nod to Davith, the lad stepping forward to set a small iron-bound coffer on the table next to them.
"It came to just a shade short of 5,000 gold pieces, my lady, not quite the 7,000 you went to the Wind Spears for, but, well, we would like you to have it." In her defense, Frithia had suffered a rather stressful time of it lately,
she promptly burst into tears. But it seemed no one could work in the theatre for long without at least acquiring the knack of comfort distressed actresses, a great soothing going up as everyone seemed to gather about to console her, Higold dabbing at his own eyes, the other hand ruffling Mech's hair as he watched them.
Oh, I do so love the theatre.
Ari drew in a deep breath, enjoying the smell of baking from the kitchens and waiting, with growing anticipation, for their own dishes, the common room quiet about them as she took an early breakfast with Jahara and Herr Dallas.
So what plans have we for today?
Ari asked, already suspecting the table's answer. The druid shrugged.
What else? We will look for more work. Ah, there will likely be meager pickings now winter is upon us,
sighed Herr Dallas, the man glancing slyly to Jahara to add,
and now we have not even the harper's bounty to claim upon.
Jahara frowned, nodding her thanks as the maid arrived with their tea.
Yes, one of the few good things to have happened of late, do not mar it for me, Bard.
Ari laughed into her sleeve, smiling as Herr Dallas poured her tea, the elf lifting it for a sip and nearly slopping it down her front as the tavern door was almost thrown off its hinges, Fritha leaping into the common room looking, well, radiant, for want of a better word, her face flushed and eyes bright as she bounded over to them.
Fritha, you've already been out,
confirmed Jahara with a frown.
Yes, I. How was your evening?
Asked Ari, raising her cup for another sip.
Lovely, and you'll never guess. By Sylvanus, you are not engaged, are you?
The druid cut in, Ari snorting what little tea she had managed to take back into her cup.
No. I. By the lady, she's already wed.
Laughed Herr Dallas. The table shook as Fritha patience was finally exhausted, the girl slamming a small strongbox onto the empty place before her.
There. 5,000 gold pieces.
Jahara recovered first.
Gods above! Did you and a no-man rob the temple of Joaquin? No, the theatre gave it to me. They called me over there this morning and they said they'd talk to the creditors and benefactors and Samuel and don't make me repeat it all, because I'll only cry again. So we can go to Galen and pay him the rest of the coin,
cried Ari. Fritha nodded, looking like she was about to burst with happiness.
So, what is stopping you, my raven? All your asinine questions. Come on.
But as much as Fritha wanted to, Jahara would not let them go further into the slums without all of them present, the woman using the opportunity as they waited for the men to dress and assemble, to lecture Fritha on the imprudence of carrying such a sum from the bridge alone, while Fritha sighed and fidgeted, and generally behaved like she was a good 10 years younger in age. Galen greeted them with his usual good cheer.
Cool. Yevi another haul for me, have ya?
Yes, Fritha agreed briskly, dumping the strongbox onto his rickety table with a solid thud.
5,000 gold pieces give or take a copper, and don't expect me to stand here while you count it, because I won't.
Galen scratched the few days' growth on his chin, the determined look to Fritha's face bringing him to a quick conclusion.
Right, well, we'll just call it 5,000 straight then, shall we? Grand. Now the ledger says Yevi still another 242, but I'm sure we can let ye off that.
He added hastily under their collective glares.
Well then,
the man sighed, clapping his hands together purposefully,
I will send a message over today and my contact will come to the coronet later with the time of the assembly. Just so ye know, ye are to be meeting with the Shadow Master himself, Aaron Linvale, and I warn ye now, m'lady, step carefully, for he doesn't suffer fools gladly. I take it you have never met him then,
muttered Jahara. Galen missed the insult.
Coo. That I haven't, and right glad I am, too, m'lady. Well, it has been pleasant working with ya,
he continued, turning back to Fritha with a friendly nod.
I hope your friend is worth the coin.
Fritha nodded, a nervous energy twisting through her stomach. And so, it was back to the coronet for yet more waiting. They had all sat down in the common room again, to resume the breakfast some of them had yet had a chance to take, but Fritha got so sick of herself snapping at everyone, she took herself back to bed before the food had even arrived. She could not sleep, of course, just lay fully clothed under the blankets listening to the bells mark the hours across the city, her body tensing every time footsteps clattered past her door. When at last the knock came, Jahara bringing news that a messenger had just arrived. They were to attend Renal's office at the 4th bells after high sun, in but an hour's time. But, in contrast to the rest of the day, that last hour seemed to pass in a blink, and, before Fritha knew it, they were outside, the twilight already closing in, though the street lamps had yet to be lit, those about her unnaturally pale in the half-light as they set off for the docks. Fritha forced a smile in return to the one Anoman had sent her, the girl more than glad when he turned his attention back to their path. The last thing she wanted to do was worry him, but it was hard to maintain the charade for long. She had been so happy that morning when the troop had given her the last of the coin, but now everything was finally moving, those last few steps to Imoen ready before her, and at last forcing Fritha to face a worry she had kept buried for a very long time. What if Imoen was really changed for her ordeal? What if she was disturbed or traumatized or broken beyond any repair? What if Imoen was dead?
Fritha
glanced up, surprised to find herself before that unobtrusive grey building, Jahara at the door and beckoning her forward. The guild hall was much altered since her last visit, although Fritha had the impression it was more for the benefit of their meeting than any permanent change. The usually spacious entrance hall crammed with keen-eyed, well-armed men who Fritha suspected were guards. There was one familiar face still about to greet them though, Myrtle spotting them through the press to send her a friendly wave, and Fritha had been about to go over and present herself when a high voice trilled out,
"Why, you're the mercenary my Aaron has been talking about!"
And Fritha could not help but take a step back as a tall, golden-haired woman appeared from between two burly guards to glide over to them, the skirts of her rich blue gown rippling like an ocean.
Hello,"
Fritha faltered.
"We're here to see Master Linvale." My, but aren't you sweet?"
The woman laughed, blue eyes shining with a seemingly genuine delight.
"But so young too, to think it is you who has been giving those vampires such trouble. What a shame you are so well known about the city, you could fit seamlessly into the ranks of my girls, I think." "Your girls?"
questioned Ari behind her. The woman nodded.
"Yes, I am Tassa, Aaron's spymaster. I have men and women both under my command, but my girls are always the best when it comes to teasing secrets out of those proud, overfed nobles."
She laughed again, closing a hand about Fritha's wrist.
"Aaron is upstairs, come along, I shall take you."
Renal's office was, barring the addition of another 4 guards, quite unchanged. The old thief master stood with a pale and unusually strapping man whom she assumed was Aaron Linvale, the 2 men on the other side of Renal's low table talking in an undertone. Aaron was younger than Fritha had expected, likely in his 35th winter or thereabouts, with short spiky blonde hair and a rather chiseled face that was dominated by deep-set green eyes. He was handsome, but he was no Renal, she concluded critically, letting her eyes fix on the old thief master and making no outward sign as she tried to will into him the gratitude she felt for what he had done.
"Aaron dearest, look who I have found downstairs,"
announced Tassa, turning to Renal with a giggle to add,
"and shame on you Renal, you never told me she was so fair."
He dipped the slightest bow.
My apologies, madam. Thank you, Tassa dear,
Aaron dismissed politely. The woman smiled and shut the door behind her, Renal gesturing to the cushions before them, though there was by no means room for them all and only the three women sat, Renal and Aaron doing the same on the other side of the table, their meeting a picnic in a forest of armed men. Aaron smiled as Renal poured the customary tea that went with such proceedings.
Welcome, Fritha, I've looked forward to meeting you for some time now. I am, as you know, Aaron Linvale, the Shadow Master of Athkatla. Now, I understand you are likely eager to be away, but there are some matters which require discussion before that can be possible. Complications have risen recently, and I wish to propose a trade of services.
A round of disgruntled muttering about her.
A trade of services.
Fritha repeated, trying to quell the angry heat that was already bubbling in her stomach.
And what of the gold we have paid?
Aaron dipped his head in acquiescence.
I apologize if you feel you have been done wrong in this. I assure you, the coin you have been paying has been put to good use.
So much for keeping her temper. Fritha's palm hit the table with a cup-rattling slap.
I don't care if you've bought everyone in the guild a shiny gold hat. The coin for Imoen, that was the deal.
To his credit, Aaron remained conciliatory.
And it was, but matters have arisen recently. Yes, you said, complications,
she cut in impatiently.
Well, what of them? This rival guild knows our actions well, most likely from the traitors who have joined their ranks. One of our safe houses was attacked last 10 days with a great loss of life, and with more of our guild members disappearing every day, many of my thieves are too fearful to even walk the streets at night lest they be next.
Behind her, a Nomen muttered something she could not quite make out, Aaron continuing as if there had been no interruption.
The information you have brought to us already has helped much, but we need to know more, namely the exact whereabouts of their stronghold. With this knowledge, we can finally begin to curb their activities and plan a firm counterattack. We know they are in the crypts somewhere beneath the cemetery, and Mistress Tassa has dispatched many an agent in hopes of learning more, but none have returned. I am sorry to hold this over you, but we have lost too many guild members to this war already, and we cannot afford to lose more. So you wish for us to go down into the crypts and find what you cannot?
Valigar rumbled. The Shadow Master shook his head.
No, indeed, I would just be sending you to your deaths. Over the past 10 days, 2 loyal members of our guild have been meeting with representatives of the vampires, trying to learn more of their operations while pretending to consider turning coat. They have fretted and dallied, and tomorrow night they are due to meet a vampire by the name of Reed, one who was once of our own flock, to be made an offer they cannot refuse. I ask that you attend the meeting, as well, and capture the creature. Capture him,
confirmed Jahara,
and return him here for interrogation, I suppose.
Aaron held her gaze unflinchingly.
I make no qualms about it. We are fighting a war for survival here, and we cannot lose. I will do all it takes to see my guild and the city safe, and the means I take will reflect that.
Fritha was frowning, she could hardly believe she was asking this, but...
And where do we bring him?
The Shadow Master seemed prepared for this question, unfurling a plan upon the table before them.
Not many outside the guild have seen this, but I trust you with the knowledge. This is the layout of our guild headquarters, located deep beneath the terraces of the docks. Here is my office, the rest of the guild rooms and temple, and here is where Reed will see out the rest of his days.
He let his finger rest on the square outline of a room set just between his office and the temple.
Here is where you need to bring him. There is a door set on the quays, between the 4th and 5th jetties, which has no visible means of opening it. Knock 5 times and you will be admitted. they will be expecting you.
Aaron moved grave green eyes back to Fritha.
Perform this task for me and you have my word, I will get you to your Imoen.
A pause, the whole room held its breath.
Fine, we'll do it,
said Fritha, already making to rise, her head dipped against the glares of those behind.
Come on. But, Fritha. I said come on.
It began as soon as they were back outside, Jahara pushing her way through the others to block the girls' path, a few of the dock workers who were gathered outside the tavern across the street looking their way, before seemingly deciding better of it and turning back to their own business.
Fritha, you cannot honestly expect. You have another option the Shadow Master has overlooked. That is not. Fritha,
cut in Anomen, his tone more placating even if his words were the same.
I understand that vampires are the fellest of creatures, but the torture of any sentient creature. Again, you have another way of getting the information we seek. Well, maybe this information comes at a price that is too high,
cried Ari passionately.
Fritha, whoever the victim, whatever the cause, torture is evil. Not only evil, but useless,
added Valigarkuli.
People will confess to anything in the end.
But Fritha would not be dissuaded.
Aaron does not seek a confession, but information that can be easily verified, and I am very sure he will be able to get what he needs. No, young Fritha, who says this is wrong, very wrong. Vampire or not, we should face our enemies in glorious battle, and let swing the righteous blade. But to capture them to deliver them to torture. No, it is not the warrior's way.
The girl shrugged.
Well, what can I say? And what happened to our customary vote?
Snapped Jahara. Fritha shot her a narrow-eyed glare.
Fine. Hands up all those who have actually been tortured.
Fritha raised her hand to a background of dark looks.
Exactly. I get the say here and I say we are going to capture this vampire. Anyone who doesn't want to come, then don't. I'll go with a whole army of newly hired mercenaries, if I have to.
Ari shook her head, looking sad.
You've become so hard.
Fritha just snorted tiredly, already turned to go.
No, I was always hard, Ari. I've just had to show it a bit more recently.
She marched them back to the coronet in silence, Fritha heading straight up to her room, only a no-man foolish enough follow.
Fritha, listen to me.
The girl sighed, dropping her bag under the window and rubbing the tight spot at back of her neck, the world beyond the glass indifferent to either pain.
Fritha, you cannot do this. Come now, Anomen, we've had our vote, majority rules,
she reminded spitefully. The knight just prevented himself from biting, Anomen closing the gap between them to press sincerely.
I do not care about the vote, Fritha, I care about you. This path the thieves are making you walk, it leads into darkness. Then that is where I must go. And what happens after this, when Linvale demands another task of you? Then I will do it.
She shouted.
And the next thing and the next. I will do whatever it takes, because I have come too far now to turn around and go right back to my beginnings. Where are you going?
He cried as she re-shouldered her bag.
Out.
And any further complaint was cut short by the slam of the door. Anomen had rejoined the others in the common room, talking quietly about their plans as they took their evening meal together, the group reluctantly reaching the conclusion that they would perform this last task for the Shadow Master, though should he ask anything further of them once the vampire was delivered, then they would be holding Frith prisoner themselves and refusing to release her until she had seen reason. As for Fritha, she made no return either during or after their meal. Anomen waited until the tavern around him was almost empty, retreating to his room only when Hendek had taken the seat opposite and, still obviously feeling indebted to them for his freedom, began a very awkward conversation on pit fighting that Anomen assumed was a roundabout way of giving him relationship advice. He was in bed now, though no closer to sleep for it, Fritha's frowning visage swimming into view every time he closed his eyes. He did not mean to argue with her. Indeed, he thought he was a lot better than he had been when they had first met. But Fritha's patience was much shorter nowadays, especially since their meeting with Fir Crag. Demlinvale and his thieves. They had their gold, did they have to take her as well? They would go and capture this vampire tomorrow, and Anomen knew he would attend with them, but if they asked anything more of her, he'd. He drew a deep breath, trying to let go of the impotent anger that had suffused him. Fritha was right, what could be done? They had refused the vampires, paid their vast amount of gold, and now they were stuck. Anomen lay still, staring up at the cracked plaster of the ceiling, the rumble of a cart in the street below drifting up through the window, mixing with the barks of a stray and distant singing.
Hey, my little Lumi girl, don't you guess, better be making your wedding dress.
But instead of fading with the other sounds, the voice grew louder.
Wedding dress, wedding dress.
The voice was under his window now and, with growing resignation, Anomen threw off the blankets and crossed to open it, leaning out to see Fritha ambling along the street beneath, her sword resting casually over one shoulder, the belt hanging from it and jangling in time with her footsteps.
Better be making your wedding dress. Fritha. Anomen,
she cried, beaming as she found him above her.
What are you doing awake?
He went to answer, but another cut him off, the shout of the disgruntled guest a few rooms along echoing up the street.
The same as the rest of us, love, shut up.
Fritha whirled to the voice, drawing her sword with a worrying dexterity, and he could hear the steel behind the melodic callant drawl.
One more word out of you, mate, and my singing'll be the least of your worries.
Silence followed and Fritha turned back to him, smiling as brightly as before. Anomen sighed.
Dearest, where have you been? Went to the theatre. Ended up playing cards in the dressing room with Win, Mayan, and Ketrick. I had the best time. Oh Anomen, I am so drunk.
She laughed, sheathing her sword and leaning heavily on it as though a walking cane.
So why are you awake? I didn't wake you, did I?
She added in an anxious undertone and he shook his head.
No, I could not sleep,
he answered, deciding he may as well be honest with her as he added,
I do not like it when we argue. Oh, me either.
She exclaimed with passion.
Every time we do, I promise myself I'm going to recapture that patience you once so liked me for, but it's gone all used up.
She sighed rather wistfully and shook herself.
Well, I'd best get to bed. Drink plenty of water before you sleep.
He called after her and he heard her laugh, though she made no reply, her song echoing cheerily as she rounded the corner.
It's already made, trimmed in red, stitched all round with a golden thread. Golden thread, a golden thread, stitched all round with a golden thread.
Anomen had finally managed to sleep after their talk, or, at least, after he had heard the familiar clatter of feet in the hallway a few moments later. They had paused outside the door opposite his own, a slam concluding the thing, and he had, at last, felt able to relax. This late night saw him sleep in though, the man catching the tail end of breakfast with the others downstairs, though he was not the only latecomer. Fritha had yet to make an appearance, and after another hour had passed, the general consensus was that she was not going to. A no-man poured out a large cup from the fresh teapot that had just been set upon their table, and moments later he was stood before her door, a light knock earning him the predictable, muffled response.
What is it? Fritha. A no-man? Go away, I'm asleep.
Without much hope, he tried the handle. It was unlocked. Helm's mercy. And he opened the door on a seemingly empty room, the only sign of life, the lumpy heap of blankets upon the bed that was capped by a messy froth of ginger curls.
Fritha,
he repeated. She groaned and tried to retreat further under the covers.
Fritha,
he continued, sitting on the edge of her bed,
how are you feeling? Oh, not too bad,
she sighed finally, clearly abandoning her plans of returning to sleep, the girl wriggling out from under the blankets to sit, and he handed her the tea he had brought. Unexpectedly, she seemed quite unconcerned by her appearance, neither the fact her hair looked more like a bright copper briar than anything else, nor that she was only wearing her slip. As far as he could tell, her shoulders quite bare save for the thin linen straps, giving her any cause for concern.
Did you drink any water last night?
he asked. She dipped her head, smiling into the cup.
A little. I was a bit far gone, to be honest.
Yes, he agreed gravely,
you did not lock your door either.
Fritha gave an absent shrug.
Oh, well, no point worrying about it now. Should you even be in here, anyway?
She added with a frown.
Don't the order have some nightly rule about visiting ladies in their bedclothes?
A no-man smiled slightly.
I believe it is left up to the discretion of the individual. I am sorry we argued yesterday, Fritha. Yes, well, I'm sorry I staggered back last night, drunk as a lion, and woke you up. As I already said, I was not asleep. And no one else in the slums was either, after I wandered through playing the merry bard.
A no-man gave her his most diplomatic smile.
You sing very nicely. Oh, shut up.
She laughed, the effort making her wince.
Oh, ow.
He laid a hand against her forehead, her skin hot, and his hand must have felt pleasantly cooled by comparison, for she closed her eyes, leaning into the touch.
I can bring you a draught for the pain, if you wish. No, it will pass. So, have you lot come to a decision, or am I crawling about the city today trying to round up some mercenaries to come with me tonight? Fritha.
He sighed reproachfully, changing hands to cup the other side of her face.
We are all attending with you, as you could have likely guessed.
The girl opened her eyes, regarding him with an unusually earnest look.
I do not mean to abuse your affections for me, you know. I know. But if Linvale asks for anything else, do not expect the same.
Fritha's face darkened with a frown.
If Linvale asks for anything else, he had better do so from behind a whole army of guards, because I'll be seeking to cut out his deceitful tongue. Fritha!
A no-man exclaimed, shocked not so much by her words, but by the venom with which she had spat them.
Sorry, but even I am not without a temper. Something you have made abundantly evident of late. A no-man.
She laughed, finally batting his hand away.
So, with you lot agreed to help and our meeting not until midnight, was there any reason to wake me this early?
A no-man smiled.
Only that I wanted to see you. Well, come back at supper time,
she laughed, making to nestle down among the blankets once more, and not bothering to suppress her groan as another knock rattled the door.
"Oh, gods! Come in!"
she called, Jahara peering around the door, the woman unable to disguise her surprise as she found him, and Anoman felt his face begin to grow hot. Fritha, though, seemed blissfully brazen about the whole thing.
"Oh, morning, Jahara. Now whatever you are here to talk of, you are by no means allowed to lose your temper, because I am feeling very delicate at the moment." 2 nights in a row,
the druid confirmed, assuming correctly the source of her affliction.
"They do say fools never learn."
Fritha sent her a smile over the rim of her cup.
"It's all part of our charm." "Well, I shall leave you both to it,"
said Anoman, neither woman speaking again until the door was shut. Fritha shifted over from the middle of the bed, patting the now empty space next to her, and Jahara, who had always taken to such things more easily in certain, albeit limited, company, kicked off her boots to recline companionably next to her.
"So, was Anoman just visiting, or did he spend the night?"
Fritha sprayed the bedclothes with the tea she had just drawn, though more from hilarity than any embarrassment, the girl squealing with laughter.
"Jahara! I told you I was in a delicate condition!"
she cried, making a half-hearted attempt to mop up the mess she had made, the other hand cradling her, no doubt, aching head. Jahara smiled innocently.
"You said not to lose my temper, I can hardly help it if you found amusement in my question." "Indeed, and as for your question, Anoman arrived this morning with tea for me. You know, I could really get used to this courtship malarkey."
Fritha continued with a pleased grin, settling back into the pillows once more.
"It's just like Beth said, it's like having a slave."
Jahara tried not smile as the girl laughed again.
"Fritha, you are awful. I assume he told you we are all agreed to come tonight, though. Don't for one moment expect us to so much as help Linvale tie his shoelaces afterwards,"
Fritha interjected shrilly, wagging an admonishing finger for good measure.
"Yes, Anoman mentioned it."
A silence fell between them, both women settling back to gaze up at the pale, whitewashed ceiling, the noise of traffic and merchants outside swelling to fill the stillness.
"She's nearly back, isn't she?"
sighed Fritha quietly, and Jahara could hear the longing in her voice.
"I'm glad, I was beginning to forget just small things, like how her voice sounds and the way her nose crinkles when she laughs."
Just like Khalid's eyes used to. How had his laugh sounded?
"Oh, Jahara!"
Fritha cried, as the druid covered her mouth with a hand, unable to choke back a sob.
"Oh, oh blast it!"
Fritha swore, Jahara just shaking her head, unable to speak for tears and laughter, both as the girl spilled hot tea into her lap in her haste to set her cup on the bedside table.
"Oh Jahara, I'm sorry." "Do not be,"
Jahara croaked eventually, sending her a watery smile.
"I am just being foolish. So much has changed in such a short space of time, it catches me out sometimes."
Fritha nodded, her eyes shifting to the window where the day she had yet to face was already rolling by.
"Yes, I feel it too, that sense that life will never be the same again. Under a year ago, my whole life was chores and practicing my lute and playing games with Mon. And now I'm here, out in the world, and everything is different and I can't ever go back, I can't ever be that girl again. And it is the same for you."
Jahara said nothing. A year ago, she had been a wife, a harper, she had had a place in the world, ties to people and places. She had had a purpose. And now, once their task to retrieve Mon was complete, she would have nothing. There was nothing. Her voice sounded hoarse when she spoke again.
"What are you going to do when you have Mon back?"
She heard the girl sigh.
"Depends on Mon really. What about you? I know you promised to stay with us, but we won't need your guidance forever. What will you do? Will you go and stay with Cerned and trade meat?
Jahara let her gaze drop to her hands, strong and scarred as they had been for many years now. She was not ready to settle down.
I suppose. I do not know. Jahara, why don't you ask Bernard to get a message to the Harpers and open a reconciliation?
The druid whipped about so fast, she pulled her neck.
What? Now, just listen,
Fritha soothed in anticipation of the expected outcry.
I know what they did was wrong, and you said you have broken ties with them, but... Well, they said themselves, that Galvary and Derman acted alone. They would have kept you imprisoned all the same.
Fritha shrugged evenly.
Perhaps, but just because they would have been complicit to that one mistake, does it mean that all they would do in Faerun is unworthy, that all the years you served them are a waste?
Jahara watched the girl watch her, wondering how anyone could be filled with such compassion.
Has anyone ever told you, you've the forgiveness of an Ilmatiri?
Fritha sent the ceiling a contemplative look.
You know, I think they might have. Wait, by goodness, if it wasn't yourself, Jahara. Foolish girl.
She chuckled, adding mulishly,
I will consider what you have said. So, what have you planned now? Now.
The girl snorted.
I'm going back to sleep. Oh, no, you are not. Wasting the day and all because you've burdened yourself with a hangover. Come on, up.
Jahara commanded, springing from the bed, Fritha giving a shriek of protest as the blankets were suddenly whipped back.
There are supplies to be bought if we are leaving the city soon.
Fritha was groaning softly, trying in vain to escape the cold air by burrowing under the pillows left.
But, Jahara.
A no-man shook the rain from his fringe, all the while trying to keep his eyes fixed on the shadow of the doorway opposite, unable to see them, but he knew all the same that they were there. ARan's two thieves were hidden in the darkness, the ones who had managed to convince an entire vampire guild of their treachery, even as they remained loyal to their masters, and the knight was not sure whether to be appalled by such deceit or impressed. The day had passed quickly, helped by their late start and the group's trip to the promenade. Fritha finally given the chance to get her chainmail mended, though they could not purchase much, not without knowing where they would eventually be headed. The evening had dragged though, most retiring to their rooms to try and get some sleep before they left, but he had not made an attempt, he was too nervous about the upcoming venture to even try. A no-man shifted his weight slightly, his legs growing stiff stood so still, concealed as he was in the shadows of an alleyway that opened onto the small square in that edge of the slums, where their meeting was to take place. Fritha and Valigar were stood in the darkness behind him, while the rest of their group were similarly hidden somewhere in the shadows of the street just to the left, out of sight of him, and the vampire both, he hoped. A no-man glanced back. Valigar and Fritha were talking quietly, their shaded faces lit with a quiet intensity beneath their hoods, though a no-man wondered if it wasn't just his natural jealousy putting on a coloring on the thing, the two finally parting with a nod, and Fritha moved to rejoin him at the corner.
Still no sign yet? What the bloody hells is keeping him?
She hissed, pulling her cloak about her more tightly, the rain lashing down at them as the wind increased in force.
Perhaps, the vampires have,
offered Valigar, only to stop as a tall blonde figure marched across the rain-pelted square. Fritha drew a deep breath, seeming to steel herself.
Right, here we go.
A brief exchange and the thieves left the shadows, following their new companion back across the square. Fritha waited for them to disappear entirely, before leaving the cover of the alley, the girl signaling to the others as she made a stealthy pursuit. They did not have to follow them for long though, Reed leading the pair to a large tavern only a street away. Frithha shook the wet curls from her face as she tipped back her hood. The common room they had just stepped into alive with light and noise compared to the wet deserted streets. Valigar's keen eyes were scanning the chaos.
No sign of them here. They've likely taken a room, they'll want some privacy,
offered Jahara. Frithha nodded.
Good, because that is just what we need, too.
As it turned out, the room was easily enough found, a trail of water from the thieves' rain-drenched cloaks leaving a wet streak on the stairs and floorboards that looked entirely too apparent to be accidental. They followed it to the first floor, their group gathering where it halted at a plain wooden door in a long corridor of similar portals.
Ready?
Frithha whispered, not waiting for their assent as she turned to knock lightly on the door.
Your ale, milords. What? You are mistaken, girl, we ordered no.
The door swung back, Reed recoiling with a hiss as a myriad of holy symbols were suddenly thrust into his face. 2 arrows whistled past her head to land within inches of each other in his shoulder, though they were mere distractions, Ari and a no-man warding him back into the room. Reed turned, the others in pursuit as he immediately sprinted for the window, and he would have made it, too, had it not been for the younger thief. The man jumped in front of him, his sword drawn for all the good it did, the creature dodging the swing with an unnatural grace to claw across his chest. This delay had been enough though, Jahara's staff catching Reed soundly across the back of the head, a blow that would have killed anyone else, doing little more than stunning him.
Quick, bind him to the chair.
A no-man and Ari were still warding the creature, and Frithha realized just how hard the Harpers must have had it. Jahara using her staff to press Reed into the chair Herr Dallas was holding as Valigar and Minsk struggled to tie him down with the rope a no-man, Jahara and Ari had each blessed earlier that day. One final knot and, at last, it was done, the group stepping back as one to catch their breath and gaze down upon their prisoner, Reed hissing and spitting as he struggled at the bonds, the lamplight glinting on the metal and polished wood of the holy symbols that surrounded him. Frithha turned her attention to the 2 thieves, the older man stooped over his younger friend, the lad clamping a bloody hand to his torn leather breastplate though, from what Frithha could see, the damage looked mostly superficial.
You all right there, mate? Don't worry about us,
he gasped, wincing as he was helped to stand.
We'll let Aaron know you've got him. We'll tell Aaron,
assured Frithha.
You get yourselves to a temple.
The older thief nodded.
Aye, as you say, miss, come on, lad.
Frithha watched them go, Valigar moving to lock the door behind them as she returned her interest to their prize, the vampire still struggling at his bonds though he stopped as she moved closer. Frithha smiled, one final step taking her inside the circle of holy symbols.
Hello, Reed, still working on recruitment, I see.
He snarled as she drew a finger along his face to leave a pale grey streak in his makeup.
Ah, so they still have you playing the role of the mortal, the lucky little thief who landed on his feet? The other thieves you get to turn coat, you seen any of them recently? I'm not saying anything to Linvale's whore.
The vampire nearly lost his tongue as a no-man's gloved hand collided with the back of his head.
Now, you're only making this easier, Reed,
Frithha warned, as the creature spat and cursed.
As it is, I bear no special love for Linvale and the thieves, I merely trust Bodhi even less. In fact, I really could not care less, if I leave here and the 2 of you wipe each other out within the 10-day, the only thing I care about is the passage to Imoen I have been promised. Then hurry up and murder me like a good little lackey,
Reed sneered. Frithha trilled a silvery laugh.
Oh, no, 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 you have it all wrong, Reed. The Shadow Master sent me here to capture you, not kill you. No, he seems to believe you can tell him all sorts of useful things about Bodhi's stronghold. I will never betray my mistress.
Jaehaera arched a derisive eyebrow.
No. I wonder how many times you spoke similarly of ARan.
Frithha smiled, slow and measured.
I think you will find the Shadow Master can be just as persuasive as Bodhi, though I imagine the experience will be far less pleasant. You know of that room in the guild, don't you? The one everyone knows about and no one speaks of. The room where certain people go and don't come out again. It's set on that long corridor to ARan's office. Clever really, everyone who must attend him has to walk past it, that subtle reminder of what happens to traitors.
She leaned in close to his face, her eyes holding his.
Well, it is waiting for you now, Reed. ARan bade me come here and fetch you back to him. Now, I do not profess to know how strong your loyalty to Bodhi is, but eventually ARan will break you and we both know it. However,
she continued airily, drawing back to stand above him once more,
as I said before, I have no real love for the thieves any more than the vampires and, moreover, I find such heavy-handed means of interrogation utterly distasteful. And so, I offer you a deal, Reed. You will tell me everything I need to know to get into Bodhi's crypt, the location, the pass for the door, where the traps are, everything, and I will set you free and let you return to your brethren to warn them of the thieves' plans. Frithha. Frithha. Who says no?
Frithha ignored the outcry around her to continue coolly,
if you refuse, I will, of course, have no choice but to take you back to ARan, where he will eventually get the information he needs anyway, and you will have no chance to warn your companions either. By Sylvanus, Frithha, you cannot just release this creature.
Frithha snorted.
Should we have another vote, do you think? So, Reed, what do you say?
The vampire gazed about them all, face etched with hatred and more than a little fear when, at last, he nodded once.
Ari, take notes,
Frithha barked, the elf still hurriedly rummaging through her pack as Reed began.
The stronghold is in the ancient crypts in the southeastern end of the catacombs. You will know you are closing upon it, for the walls are covered with the frescoes to some ancient sun god, I don't know its name. You will reach a dead end, a cave-in or so it will seem. It is an illusion and barrier both, but a mage of enough skill can bring it down. Beyond that point.
And the vampire continued, detailing the traps they would face at each turn and the beasts that had been summoned and enslaved to patrol the maze of corridors, as he described the path they would take that would finally lead them to the doors to their stronghold, not warded, but too heavy for any mortal to move.
And that is it,
he finished finally,
that is all I know.
Frithha drew back, nodding slowly.
Very good, Reed, you made the wisest choice and I am pleased you did not make a torturer of me, just a murderer.
A glance to Valigar, Reed did not even have time to voice his outrage. A flash of steel and his head was in his lap, his body burnt away to ash but an instant later.
Frithha!
Cried more than one voice about the room, the girl holding up a hand to resignedly forestall their anger.
One at a time, please. Did you plan to do that all along?
Demanded Jaehaera, the first to find her voice in that room of stunned faces.
No,
said Frithha flatly,
I considered it as a course, and asked Valigar about it just before Reed arrived. But if he had refused to talk, I would have taken him back to ARan, and that would have been that. But, Frithha,
cried a gnomon,
you gave him your word.
The girl nodded absently.
Yes, funny, isn't it? The wicked are always so suspicious of their own kind, yet so unwaveringly trusting of the good in others. Funny isn't the word I would use,
snapped Ari.
No.
confirmed Fritha bluntly.
You wanted to take him to Aran for torture, did you? You got all he said, I assume.
Ari was still frowning as she nodded mutely.
Good, then let's return to Linvale. But, young Fritha, you lied to him. You killed him even as he was defenseless before you.
Pressed Minsk, the Rashami staring at her with a disbelief that stung, and well earned it was too. Fritha nodded.
Yes, Minsk, I did. Be proud, Reed.
She sighed, gazing down at the dusty chair.
Though there have been many instances that eroded it, I think it was you who finally took the last of my honor.
End of chapter.